Oh, say again, Anthony?
Doing it now, and yep, we're live.
You're live. Go for it.
Oh, awesome. Hey, everyone. Um, Anthony, are you going to give us a little bit of an introduction or?
Um, yeah, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Middleton. I am the community manager at Hedera Hashgraph. On this webinar, on this Meetup webinar today, we have Cooper Coombs. He is the developer evangelist currently at Hedera. He will be starting us off with our first presentation. Go, Cooper.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, so I work at Hedera Hashgraph. As he said, my name is Cooper, where I'm a developer evangelist. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the exciting use cases for the Hedera public network. And before we dive into the use cases, I think it's helpful to take a step back and talk about kind of the key tenets that Hedera is trying to solve. And these are things that we think are preventing enterprise adoption of public distributed ledgers. So Hedera is architected and built from the ground up to be performant, to be secure, to be stable, and to have stable and strong governance. And hopefully I'll talk a little bit about each of these and then dive into the specifics of what you can do on Hedera and some of the use cases. But once we have these four tenets, and what Hedera's real goal is to be the third generation public distributed ledger. And so Bitcoin brought us this amazing decentralized infrastructure. Ethereum brought us these really innovative smart contracts and way to exchange assets. Hedera is trying to do this at scale and for mainstream markets. And so just to give those who aren't familiar a picture of how this kind of looks, you can see how blockchains look on the left and how Hashgraph kind of looks on the right. Those familiar with like IOTA or things from that space might think that it looks pretty similar. But I can tell you that the biggest similarity between Hashgraph and kind of these other DAGs or directed acyclic graphs are certainly these diagrams. And so Hashgraph isn't a blockchain. It's actually a consensus algorithm and a data structure that it's an alternative to blockchain and proof of work. So it's kind of a new way to do the things that we've already been doing and gives us some unique things that those old systems didn't do. And so it does this using a directed acyclic graph, which is just this data structure you see on the right here. And it does this with kind of novel inventions that Dr. Lehman Baird, the guy who invented Hashgraph, our CTO, came up with called virtual voting and gossip about gossip. And these are two things inherently unique to the Hedera and Hashgraph platform. Gossip about gossip is just the way that nodes actually share information throughout the network, and virtual voting is how they determine and come to a finality consensus on that information after it's been spread. And so Hedera, the public implementation of Hashgraph, is currently supporting about 10,000 cryptocurrency transactions a second, which is orders of magnitude faster than some of these alternatives. Uniquely, Hashgraph also provides guaranteed finality within just a few seconds, which is something that proof of work and probabilistic consensus never achieves. And Hashgraph itself is formally proven to be asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, or ABFT, which is essentially the gold standard of security in distributed systems. And if you're interested to learn more about that, we have a full formal proof of it. You can go and download it and verify it and check it out yourself. It's a tremendous body of work for sure. I don't feel the need to talk too much about traditional blockchain architectures. I feel like the market is pretty familiar with them. There are some specific differentiators between our platform where we have things like selective immutability that enables things like GDPR compliance potentially, and that we're just more scalable, more performant, and I will touch on some of these key differentiators later. And to give you a better picture of kind of how the ecosystem looks, you have this Hashgraph consensus at the bottom of the stack. On top of Hashgraph consensus, we have built 4 network services that are exposed to developers through our APIs. We have our own cryptocurrency. We have support for Solidity smart contracts. We have a file service, and we actually have a newly announced consensus service. Kind of off to the right, you can see that the Hedera Governing Council oversees and kind of controls this portion of the stack. and doesn't control anything up above it. So the Hedera Governing Council is really our answers to the stability and to the governance questions that I raised at the earlier of the presentation. And so how can you ensure that platforms are stable, that they're not going to change too much? That if you're investing, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into building an application onto one of these platforms, that's a qualified and a reasonable investment. And the Governing Council is really our answer to these kinds of problems. But on top of the Hedera platform, these things in purple that you can see here, you have all these awesome third-party applications. And these are applications that can be in any type of industry, any type of market. They can be an individual person just hacking on something in their basement, or some of the largest companies and governments in the world. These companies don't need to talk to us. They don't need a license to build on the platform. They can really just do it kind of behind the scenes. And to Hedera's goal of being the trust layer of the internet, kind of like how the internet's just there and you can use it without talking to anyone. That's very much the goal with Hedera, where we don't have to know what you're doing, but it's this utility that's always kind of there as a backbone. And so to talk more in depth about how we provide this stable home and this unique governing concept, I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth about the Hedera Governing Council. So the Hedera Governing Council is made up of up to 39 leading global organizations. And these aren't organizations just from one kind of market or one geography. We want them to be representative of all markets and all geographies around the world. Every member of the Hedera Governing Council is required to run a network node, which is kind of a testament to their commitment to the platform and ensuring it's a stable environment for themselves. The Governing Council members are actually not incentivized or compensated in any way beyond actually the fees that they generate from running those nodes. So just like in the future, when Hedera enables permissionless nodes, their nodes will be no different other than the stake that is proxied to them. All members of the Hedera Governing Council have an equal vote. Depending on the kind of degree of importance of the decision, those votes either have to be unanimous, so everyone on the 39 companies needs to agree, or you need a supermajority, which is like a 2/3 plus one. There are other decisions, obviously, that don't require that strong of a buy-in, but it does provide the testament that critical decisions require critical amounts of votes from the decentralized council. One of the unique things that Hedera does is we guarantee that these council members aren't actually able to stay on the council forever. Unlike other protocols where you have either the core developers or the foundations who will kind of be controlling it or stewarding it, probably as long as they want to. Hedera will have 3-year term limits and a maximum of 2 terms. So the most amount of time that these companies can spend on our council is 6 years. And so the first members will be selected by Hedera. There was no one really to select the first members. But now that we do have these first members, there's actively a selection committee, and they're working on finding their own replacements and complementary markets and businesses to kind of fill out the rest of the seats. And so the Governing Council really is in charge of almost everything about that kind of bottom of the stack that I showed you earlier. They're responsible for the decisions of what gets added to that platform and what it does. They're responsible for the roadmap and kind of when we do things, how long we plan out, things like how worried are we about quantum encryption and, post-quantum signature support. Things like our fee and incentive model, our crypto economics, and how things get distributed and managed through our treasury all require these kind of critical decisions from this Governing Council, which is really, really unique to us. Which is why we're so happy to have such strong companies, is because we have strong governance. And strong governance is really our answer to, the stability problems from earlier. Through a variety of legal and technical controls, the Hedera platform is guaranteed to never fork. And this means that if you're actually investing, a significant amount of money and resources into building on these types of networks, you have a guaranteed stable environment where you don't have to worry about which type of fork do we support, what do I do about my users' data, now that it exists in multiple places. And so there's a variety of ways that through legal and technical controls, the Hedera Governing Council is going to make sure that the environment that people are building on is something that they themselves feel confident in and feel themselves worth investing the resources to build on top of. And because these are such important decisions and such, strong commitments to our technology and what we're doing, we're really excited that these companies are actively taking a role involved in our network. And so these are the 10 plus or the 9 plus world companies currently on the Hedera Governing Council. We have Deutsche Telekom, we have Swisscom, IBM, Nomura Holdings, Tata Communications, DLA Piper, FIS, Boeing, and Magalu. And so we're really, really excited that these are kind of the first group of companies taking this leadership and ownership role of the Hedera network and where we go from here. I think that we're all super excited to see the rest of the council fill out those geographies not yet represented, as well as those business and market segments that are not yet represented. But we're really excited that these companies are actively governing, actively running nodes in our network and contributing to our ecosystem. And so now that you have an idea of kind of the key differentiators in technology, whether it's the Hashgraph-based consensus, whether it's the Hedera Governing Council and the way that they can provide stability and strong governance, let's talk a little bit now about the network services and what you can actually do on top of this network. So there's 3 initial network services and a recently added 4th. The first of which is Hedera cryptocurrency. Like I said earlier, it supports 10,000 plus transactions per second, and that's per shard. So Hedera was built from the ground up to shard. And so we will be able to scale far beyond the 10,000 per second and then far beyond just a single shard. HBAR is, like other public networks and their native tokens used to pay for the network fees, pay for network storage, and to compensate those nodes actually doing that processing. And then it's also used in Hedera's proof of stake mechanism. So HBARs are, weighted in that virtual voting protocol I talked a little bit about earlier, and it gives us all the security and the goodnesses of controllable crypto economics. And so with Hedera's cryptocurrency, there's a lot of different things around payments that we'll talk a little bit about in a second. The next of Hedera's network services is the Hedera file service. So the file service is a really interesting way where you can anchor data that's not on the Hedera network and put it on the Hedera network for transparent verification. In the same way that it might be helpful to have payments being logged in on a transparent network where everyone can see the history of those logs, it's also really helpful to have files managed in the same way. This does things like, ensures 100% data replication. So if that file is super important, you can always get it. And there's a bunch of unique things like the consensus timestamps on Hashgraph, where you could upload a file to prove that it was submitted at a given time on a given date. So there's a bunch of interesting things about file service that we'll talk about. And then native to Hedera, we also have selective immutability and this kind of a concept where you have the ability to attest and claim something on the network and also revoke that claim from the network. But we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Hedera has support for Solidity smart contracts, which is a huge, something we're really, really excited about. So everyone who's building on Ethereum, building on these other networks, can bring their Solidity smart contracts to us and deploy them without any changes. Unlike running on Ethereum or some of these other networks, we actually have fair ordering. And you can't pay more gas to be included earlier in transaction history. You're always going to pay the same fee, and you're going to have the same kind of advantages or opportunities that everyone else does to get included earlier in state. And then one of the unique things that Hedera does to be enterprise friendly is that we actually enable what's called administrative keys or administrative privileges to smart contracts. You could imagine a consortium or a large group of companies deploying a smart contract or a set of smart contracts to a network, and they can actually define that, a multi-sig key where everyone in that consortium has to all sign off on a transaction in order to update that contract. But this does give you ways where if everything hits the fan and you really need to put a pause on that contract and update it for security vulnerabilities, you can do so in a way that's transparent and still preserves the kind of decentralized nature of requiring that multi-party agreement. And then the newest service on the Hedera network is actually the Hedera consensus service. This was recently announced a few months ago in this white paper that's available for download. It was co-authored by Dr. Lehman Baird, who is the original inventor of Hashgraph, Brian Gross, who's the principal product manager at IBM's blockchain platform, and Donald Devo, who's the principal product manager at Hedera. And so this is a really, really interesting white paper. It basically architects and lays out a way that you'll be able to build applications and use the Hedera network while still having the security and the speed benefits that Hashgraph and our native services like HBAR has. And so building using the consensus service, you're able to get the same kind of scalability, that 10,000 transactions per second, that guaranteed fair order, but you're able to take that kind of consensus and that guaranteed order and actually use that as the ordering in existing ecosystems or other places that you're trying to build in. So this is a really nice way that you'd be able to integrate Hedera's consensus service with things like Hyperledger Fabric or IBM's blockchain platform, where you'd be able to stand up a Fabric deployment and then have the ordering and the actual consensus for that Fabric deployment go on Hedera. And then after that consensus has been achieved, the results in these Fabric deployments that are listening to Hedera would be updated in accordance. And so it's a really interesting way where you can combine the opportunities in the the ecosystem of Hyperledger and these other existing Fabric deployments with some of the decentralized security and the trust model of the Hedera public network, and create this kind of new hybrid architecture that wasn't really possible before. So we're really excited about the consensus service. And so with these things, we've actually already seen a good amount of developer adoption. When we launched our mainnet on September 16th, there was already 26 applications, live and running on our mainnet, which we were very happy about. These are things all across different markets and different verticals, from supply chain to advertisements to stablecoins. We're seeing developer interest across all different types of, ecosystems and communities. We already had over 9 million, it's probably closer to 10 million by now, transactions completed on the Hedera network since we started kind of onboarding our users. And we're averaging somewhere between 250 and maybe 350 or 400,000 transactions a day on the network, which is, to give comparison, Ethereum's average is somewhere between 600 and 700,000. So with only being live for about 3 weeks, and having onboarded users, about 7 weeks ago, we're really excited about the amount of transactions going on the network, the interest that we're seeing from developers, and the ability that they're going to have to be able to grow the way that they're using the network with the growth of their business. They're not anywhere near maxing out the capacity or the throughput limits on what we're doing. So that's also really good to see. And so just to talk, specifically, like, what do we think makes sense to build on Hedera that really doesn't make sense to build elsewhere? And I think it's important to kind of have these clear conversations. So if you're looking to build something that has high throughput, we're currently supporting 10,000 plus cryptocurrency transactions per second. When the consensus service is available, we're expecting it to be somewhat on par with that performance. We're currently throttling our file service and our smart contract service to just 10 transactions a second, but we expect to be ramping up that throttle and increasing the throughput on those rapidly. So look forward to that. And I expect us to be hitting, 3 digits, something like that. Low latency. So if you actually need guaranteed finality within a few seconds, if you're talking about, point of sale systems or things where you need that instant confirmation, it really makes sense to build on something that has that finality rather than just, assuming that something like a 0 block confirmation or 1 block confirmation is going to work. Hedera sets all of our network fees in in US dollars. So every time you use our APIs, you're going to be paying a small bit of HBAR. Regardless of the price fluctuations in HBAR, you actually know how much it's going to cost in US dollars. And so you can choose to offset those costs to your users, or you can actually plan your businesses, months or years out in accordance with how many users you will have. And that's a really interesting model that not a lot of other people are pursuing. Like I discussed earlier, the ability to have administrative privileges where a consortium could collectively say, hey, this is a security bug and we need to pause this and fix it before letting people use it, and things like that is a really unique model. Claims and revocations. So with our selective immutability, being able to give someone a driver's license on the network and be able to say, hey, you got in a car accident, we're actually revoking that driver's license and taking it away from you, is another interesting thing that selective immutability in Hedera provides. The required signatures is something that not a lot of people talk about. But basically on Hedera with your cryptocurrency accounts, you can actually define keys that are allowed to send you money. So basically, if I'm an organization and I have legal agreements with 3 other companies that I'm planning on using Hedera with, I can have their public keys be attached to my account. And I can make it so only these people are allowed to send me transactions. Basically, every member of this group would have to sign off on a transaction for it to get into my account. And so if you're a large business and you're dealing with economic sanctions, or you're a government and you're dealing with economic sanctions, and you need to prevent other people from other countries sending you money, or you need to prevent and make sure that only approved parties are sending you money, this is a really interesting thing that Hedera enables. And then in addition, all of our signatures and all of our keys can basically be these arbitrarily deep threshold and multi-sig keys, where you can actually have your keys kind of represent your business organizations in real life, where you have a board of directors, you might need 51% of them to sign off to move funds out of an account. And so if you need these types of things, we really think it makes sense to consider and look into building on Hedera. But there's kind of a lot of companies, there's a wide range of applications building on us for a variety of reasons. But there's kind of 3 specific use cases that we think are tailor suited for Hedera. And so one of these is payments. We talked a lot about it over the past couple of years with our example applications, but we're really excited about micropayments. And so this is sending people, under 10 cents, things that fundamentally aren't possible due to getting cost out of existing business models. Micropayments and different types of cryptocurrency payments do allow for like ad hoc business relationships. So removing a paywall, where right now if I want to give you money, you actually have to collect all of my billing information and collect a lot of information about me personally to even be able to accept that payment. And things like browser extensions and Web3 are going to hopefully disintermediate those paywalls entirely, and you can actually just pay for what you use rather than paying for monthly subscriptions. And then cryptocurrency and blockchain-based fundraising in general is a really interesting model for anything in the public space or anything that needs transparency. So if you are a political contributions, being able to actually prove to everyone that your average donation was $12 rather than a couple $100,000, or being able to prove that the way that these contributions were actually spent is what people were expecting them to be. I expect to see a lot of people kind of moving into this space where people will begin to expect this type of transparency. And so AdStacks is one of the applications building on Hedera, actively using Hedera's cryptocurrency service. Basically, they are a decentralized advertising service, which will use a combination of KYC accounts to know your customer and ensure that there's actually people watching your advertisements. And then in real time, they'll actually pay the multiple parties involved in an advertisement deal, whether it's the person who created the ad, the person seeing the advertisement, the site that the ad was rendered on. You can provide a lot of transparency and immediate real-time insight into this kind of whole life cycle by doing it on a public network like Hedera. And they're working with some of the largest media and advertisement companies in the world, actively working on ramping up. They're doing a large number of transactions per second on the Hedera network already. And we really think that Hedera's high throughput and kind of low latency makes great sense for what AdStacks is doing. Another use case that we're really excited about is credentials. So that's kind of verifying different types or different attributes of your decentralized identity. An easy example of this is your college diploma or your food handler's card, being able to have an account on the Hedera network that has these attributes or attestations from a third party saying that I verify that this person got their degree. And being able to update these and manage these in real time is something that's going to drastically improve existing business processes. If you think about what it would take now to actually prove that you have the degrees that you say that you do or the certifications that you do, it's a laborious manual process. You usually have to show up somewhere in person and file some paperwork. And so you can really cut down a lot of the intermediaries and even the manual labor required to do credentialing to date. And then with Hedera, one of the unique things that we do is revocation. So if you do have a diploma, your university can still come in the future and say, we actually revoked your diploma if you did something that they disagree with. Perhaps they found out you cheated on a test. So there's actually some really interesting things you can do about real-time credentialing and decentralized identity and proving that you actually are who you say that you are. So My Earth ID is one of the companies that's building a decentralized identity and credential management solution on Hedera. Essentially, they'll let you take in a bunch of different types of identity attributes, whether it's your social security number, your passport, or any of these other things. You can give them, as little information as you want or as much information as you want. And they can start to build reputations around this. So when you share that identity with someone, they could have access to all the information that you let them, or as little of the information as you let them. And you would know in real time what information that these other companies and people have access to, rather than right now, it's kind of like a black box and you're trusting that the companies who do have that information aren't sharing it with third parties. And so being able to do this in a decentralized way where you control that information and grant access rather than giving that information to someone else and them granting access is kind of a big differentiator. And then the third use case that we're really excited about is tokenized assets specifically. So DLA Piper is building a really interesting tokenized asset marketplace on Hedera Hashgraph, which is one of our council members. So we're really excited about this. Tokenized assets are a really interesting way to generate liquidity. So if you have, a real estate license or a business that's worth billions of dollars, how do you find people to buy up large portions of that and get enough sufficient liquidity that you can sell that as easily as you'd like to be? And so tokenization lets you create, individual pieces, and you can sell as small fractions of those pieces as you'd like. You could sell 1/1 millionth of a building rather than selling the entire building to someone. And then being able to actually have these assets and be able to swap them on chain, whether you're trading things that are supposed to, typically be traded together, whether you're trading two types of currencies or two things that, no one would really think would make sense to trade. It's interesting that you have a way to do this in a trustless way, obviously. And then I'm really interested in like DAOs and ways that we can decentralize, organize each other, and have these be on-chain and transparent. So things like the Ethereum DAO are different interesting use cases for different types of tokenized assets where you can have actually entire on-chain incorporation where people's paychecks are coming out of this DAO and it's kind of a self-sustaining business. So there's a lot of interesting things around tokenized assets that we're excited about. And so, yeah, so DLA Piper, I think this is actually a duplicate of the last slide. But yeah, they're building a tokenization marketplace on top of us. We're really, really excited to share more details about that when we can. And so that's actually all that I had today. If you want to learn more about Hedera, what we're doing, ways that you can get involved, whether you're interested in the council, whether you're interested in building on us, whether you're interested in getting involved in the community, like please reach out. We're always looking to get more people involved in what we're trying to do. And yeah, well, thanks for your time. We'll definitely be around for questions and stuff after our other presentation here.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Cooper. Actually, you have a few questions in the QRA. I'm not sure if you can see those there.
Let me see.
First one from Great Days says, to run smart contracts and use Chainlink nodes, they expect link tokens as rewards. So applications running on Hedera network will need HBAR and link.
That's a good question. I'd love to answer Chainlink specific questions after Thomas gives his presentation. Hopefully he addresses some of them and we can follow up on those afterwards if he wasn't able to get to them.
It's a good point. Good point.
Yeah. Is there another one, Anthony? I can't see them. Are they in YouTube or in this Q&A?
Yeah, they're on YouTube here.
Let me...
I can see that ones do seem a bit
kind of meta. I'll pull up the YouTube live stream while on the YouTube live stream.
Yeah, they are. They do seem a bit also focused towards Chainlink, so we can wait until Chainlink gets presented as well, and then
yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's have Thomas present, and we can circle back up with any outstanding questions.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool. So now we're going to kick it over to Thomas Hodge. Thomas is the integrations engineer over at Chainlink. Thomas, take it away.
Hey everyone, let me share my screen here. All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, it's looking great over here.
Okay, good. So my name is Thomas and I work on Chainlink, which is a decentralized Oracle network. As a brief overview, we're going to talk about what Chainlink is and how it can be used on Hashgraph, and then I'll go over the questions that have come in. I guess since this is kind of like a live stream, I can't really flip over to see the questions as they come in, so I'll just cover them at the end. So in order to understand Chainlink, we have to first understand that smart contracts are not able to connect to external data or any off-chain data resource on their own. And this is a big limiting factor for smart contract adoption because it means that the only thing that we can do with the smart contract is essentially token or value transfers. So one of the key problems that we're focused on solving with Chainlink is getting data to smart contracts. And there are thousands of APIs out there that are already providing data that people need for their applications. We make it easy to enable connectivity between those APIs and smart contracts, even if they require authentication. So now you can have decentralized applications powered by the same reliable APIs that current web applications use today. Then there's also the fact that not everyone wants to be paid in a cryptocurrency yet. So when a smart contract has executed, people need the ability to get paid in a currency they want, and we make it easy for off-chain payments to take place based on on-chain interactions. And then along those same lines, if you want to send a transaction to one chain based on the execution of a smart contract on another chain, it's just as easy to do that as well. Chainlink uses external adapters to enable connectivity to any resource, be it a API, another chain, an API that requires authentication, like a payments API, basically anything that you want to connect to. If the Chainlink node itself cannot connect to it because it's not an open API, then you can use an external adapter to enable that connectivity. And external adapters can be written in any language that you want. They only need to react to specific requests sent from a Chainlink node and respond back with data formatted in a way that the Chainlink node can consume. So because of that, it's really easy to get started and extend the functionality of Chainlink without needing to know anything about like your underlying blockchain or Solidity or anything like that. You can just use the language that you're comfortable programming in. So to get a bigger picture, Chainlink is a decentralized Oracle network used to connect smart contracts to any API. You can select as many Oracle nodes or Chainlink nodes as we call them as you like, and use as many data sources as you like to trigger the execution of your smart contract. Then we also enable off-chain payments to occur based on the execution of a smart contract. So if the result of a smart contract said that someone should get paid $100 USD, you can utilize Chainlink to send that transaction. Where Chainlink comes in with Hashgraph is you can use it as a secure input for Hashgraph smart contracts for credential management, tokenizing real-world assets, and supply chain. So we're really excited to continue this integration and see what can be built on Hashgraph. And then, of course, I'll go over the questions that we have now. If you want to get started looking into Chainlink, we have the link up on the page. It's very short. It's just docs.chain.link. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problems. Thank you, Thomas. That was super interesting. Do you want to pull up the YouTube chat and see if there are any questions that you are potentially able to answer?
Yeah, just remembering that question from earlier. Basically, the rules there would be the same as like what we currently support on Ethereum, where when you create a request on Ethereum, you're paying ETH for the gas, and then you're still using Link to pay for the node operator to fulfill that request. So essentially, you would come across the same set of rules where that underlying blockchain has its own asset used for, well, essentially like execution, because you're paying for the execution on the blockchain, and then you're still utilizing Link to pay for the node operator to fulfill that request.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. You need to pay Hedera for your smart contract and whatever you're trying to do. And then additionally, you need to pay the Link operator or the node operator in Link for whatever they're trying to do. Cool. Let's see what other questions we have here. Someone asked something about when we're going to announce new council members. Hopefully we'll announce them soon. We have shared everything that we can there. Anything else? Like, feel free to drop some questions in the chat, guys. You have both of us hanging out here. What is the incentive for HBAR to go up if people can pay in USD? We cannot comment about token specifics and token price. Sorry. Please drop questions specifically if you have anything about what our Chainlink integration looks like, or ways that you can actually use connected oracles from the Hedera network. Those are questions that we're happy to answer. Anything else, guys? Does anyone have any questions from the actual meetup in Toronto?
There is a significant delay between when we say something and when YouTube picks it up.
Yeah,
okay, that's good to know.
No, Cooper's he's super jazzed to get your questions out, guys. So start throwing them in whenever you got them. And we are part of the Toronto meetup right now. I think we're trying to get connected so we can get some of the live questions happening there as well. That might take a few more minutes, but as soon as we get that connected, we can get those out. I think I see a few questions coming in right now. Well, I think that was about council members as well.
Are council members also clients of Hedera? I don't really know what you mean by clients, maybe like users of Hedera. I can say that people, like, one of the major incentives and one of the major justifications for joining the council is that you have real business use cases and needs for an enterprise network in this space. Because there's not really any other additional incentives there, but like they're not getting compensated in any way, shape, or form that's going to change their market cap or their potential revenues, really. The major reason for joining the council is that you want to build on the Hedera network.
I can pick up that Oracle question too.
Cool, that would be great.
So the question is, can an Oracle running on, I'm going to assume that autocorrect put in headers for Hedera, provide attestation to another smart contract system, e.g. a contract running on ETH? And yes, it's basically there's the Chainlink node is still the Chainlink node. So it can provide the same kinds of inputs to Hedera as it would for Ethereum. So there's really no difference there.
Yeah, lots of potential ways to use it. Would you like to also take this kind of next one about how Chainlink deals with potentially bad data?
Yeah, so that's a very common question that we get anyway. It's essentially, and this is in our white paper as well, where we utilize decentralization to combat fake data or maybe malicious data or inaccurate data. So it basically comes down to, if you want stronger guarantees for the accuracy of data, you need better and more reliable and hopefully more available data sources to execute that smart contract.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the idea would essentially be that anyone who's providing fake data would be such a small set of that decentralized network that it really wouldn't actually have an effect on the outcome.
Right. In an ideal situation, yes. And there are some situations where there's like only one data source as available anyway. So like take the government, for example.
Oh, yeah.
it basically comes down to like, at least if that's known up front, you can create your smart contracts around that to basically assume that it's incorrect until it can be proven otherwise. But
Yeah,
that comes down to like the individual dApp developer. It's not something that would be, oh, surprise, all of a sudden we only have one data source for something. It's like, that would have been agreed upon up front.
Yeah, it would have been a risk qualification and something that they were aware of, moving forward with that architecture. And kind of the thing for you guys is that you provide the flexibility where if they didn't want to do that or they wanted to do it something else, that they would have those choices.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. All right. We appreciate the questions, guys. Keep them coming.
Yeah, and hey, AJ over in Toronto, if you are able to connect with the webinar, go ahead and sign on over, and then we can get those questions in as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Anything else? Anthony, did you hear whether or not they will be joining us from Toronto, or was that just a open suggestion?
No, I've emailed with the ambassador, so we're just waiting for him to connect onto the webinar feature so we can get those questions in as well. Just a few more minutes there. Right now.
Did anyone watching get the chance to tune into our open access live stream virtual event? We were pretty happy that Johan and the Chainlink team were able to participate. Anything else? I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if you do have questions and aren't able to ask them in this format or want to ask them in a different channel, whether it's Twitter, Telegram, contact me via email. Happy to try to answer any questions that you have or help you, especially if you're looking to build on Hedera and aren't really sure where to get started. Definitely reach out. Jump in our Discord channel. Our Discord's really helpful and good as well. Lots of good engineers. Okay, let's see. So there's a good question here about regulations and compliance for people wishing to do security tokens offerings. The actual implementation and the compliance of any, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, don't listen to me. Get actual legal advice. This is not legal, not good advice. But the implementation, it would depend on the implementation. So each of those would have to be evaluated on an individual project basis. And it depends, specifically how those are set up and the rules for their whatever they're trying to do. So it's a case-by-case basis. Talk to an actual lawyer for sure. How fast could smart contracts run on Hashgraph and Chainlink combined? That's a good question. So Hedera can process your smart contracts in about 1.2 seconds or 1.9 to probably 3 seconds. To actually process and invoke that function. I don't know the average response time on Chainlink's end. Maybe Thomas has an idea.
Yeah, that would be like milliseconds. It's just to create an HTTP request. So it's most likely the Chainlink nodes would not be the bottleneck.
Yeah, so if you go submit a transaction to a Hedera smart contract, that's 2 seconds. Call Chainlink, that's a millisecond. Gets sent back to Hedera. Got another 2 seconds, so about 5 seconds round trip potentially. Untested, just throwing out guesses here. But hopefully we'll start being able to do real world performance testings and things like that for those looking to see those actual statistics. Any cold wallets for HBAR? You can go to hedera.com/wallets. It's also available from our navigation bar, and you can see which wallets we're aware of that support Hedera and HBAR. There's obviously wallets that can support us without telling us because you don't have to. But we should have, you will see that Ledger Nano is on that page. It says that it's coming soon. I don't know when exactly it's coming, but it is coming soon. And then we're working, with other cold wallet providers or cold storage providers, custody providers, actively trying to get more support there as well. Hopefully that answers your question. How big is the Hashgraph team? That's a great question. I want to say we're between 70 and 80 employees right now. And that's not including, the actual council members, their subcommittees, the people involved in all that process. That's not including, contractors and part-time employees or our, ambassadors all around the world. They're mostly headquartered in Dallas. So we have a nice office in Dallas, and that's where, most of our core engineering team is. And then we have kind of satellite offices and teams in New York now, San Francisco, London, and different parts of Europe. And then we have a team in Singapore as well. When is sharding planned? That's a good question. That ultimately is up to, like every other roadmap decision, it's up to the council and when they think we need sharding. Everything that Hedera does is usually, when do we think that we will need this type of demand? And so essentially, if we're seeing adoption and we think that people are going to hit the capacity limits on a single shard, we will prioritize and reshift our focus in accordance to implement sharding and be able to support that. But like I said earlier, Hedera is architected from the ground up to be able to do so. There's some mentions of it in our white paper, and anyone who has a Hedera account will see that there's like a 0.0. your account number, and those are already implemented for shard. Like the first one's a shard ID, the second one's a realm ID, and then you have your account number within that shard and realm. So Hedera is very much forward thinking and planning on implementing sharding. It will get implemented probably when the network needs it. It's not gonna, we're not gonna unnecessarily allocate our resources to pre-scale in that way. Complete beginner here. Any questions where to start? I presume that you're a developer looking forward or looking into getting started building on Hedera. So my entry point would probably be docs.hedera.com. You can go to hedera.com and find the documentation link. It gives you a really high overview of the different ways we manage accounts and contracts and files, different things you can do with them. It lays out all the API specifications so you can see how to use them. And then there's really good examples from our Java SDK within each of those actual APIs and the references for them there. So docs.hedera.com is a great place to start looking at how you actually use these things. If you're interested in how it works kind of under the hood, I would recommend YouTube. Lehman has a bunch of amazing videos of him detailed understanding how the Hashgraph consensus algorithm works. You can sign up for testnet accounts on portal.hedera.com. And then there's also some community members like Zabo, I believe, who provide a kind of sandbox portal so that you can use our testnets if you sign up for their platform rather than going through us. Hopefully one of those three answers your question about where to get started.
There's an interesting Chainlink question, if you don't mind me picking that
up. No, if you want to answer any of them, just go for it.
Yeah, so the question is the Chainlink request secure from man in the middle? Basically, this, as an individual node operator, it would still be just as possible to perform a man in the middle as you would for any client, because if you were to perform a successful man in the middle attack, the client wouldn't even know. So at an individual client level, it doesn't really make sense to even say that you're secure from it. However, when you look at the bigger picture of a decentralized Oracle network, where the more oracles you're using, the harder it is to pull off that attack. So if you're using 10 oracles versus just one oracle, it is now 10 times as difficult to perform a man-in-the-middle attack, which would essentially affect the outcome of that smart contract. So in that sense, I would say yes, because you can add security to your oracle request to be secure against man-in-the-middle attacks, executing your smart contract in a way that you don't want it to be executed.
Yeah, you could implement it in specific ways that require, people to 51% or, whatever attack your Oracle network as well.
Yep.
So interesting things there. Are there any other questions flowing through the chat that you'd like to answer?
About the reference data contracts, I can't answer that. I'd like to just acknowledge that I can't, but that way it's just not left in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, similarly, there's a question about, I guess there's a JavaScript wrapper for developing on Hashgraph question. We're definitely working on a JavaScript SDK. Whether or not it will be officially Hedera supported long-term or something developed by Hedera and then supported by the community, I'm not 100% sure with. But I do think it's already on our GitHub. I think it's written in TypeScript and you can use it in JavaScript and Node environments. But if you want a JavaScript wrapper, take a look there. It's open source software. So like if you want to help out and if anyone wants to build a JavaScript wrapper, like I would personally be super happy if someone's working on that. But hopefully that comes out in the next couple of months. Yeah, guys, I can't comment on tokens or exchanges or anything like that. Sorry about that. Szabo plus Chainlink plus Hedera equals a useful DAO? That's I guess a question. So Szabo is kind of like an API kind of payment platform that makes it easier to develop on other networks. And so it would make sense to use Szabo and some of these other things, to use Hedera, and therefore use Chainlink as well. Chainlink and Hedera, obviously would work really well for a DAO if there's some type of external data that you're using to determine the rules of that DAO. But yeah, they're kind of different parts of the stack. Yeah, Anthony, I did just attempt to answer this one. So again, is there a JavaScript wrapper to develop on Hedera with? There's one that's open source already. It has limited support for cryptocurrency, I believe. I don't think it supports smart contracts or files yet. And we're working to add and integrate those APIs as well. Go check it out on GitHub, see what the, how up to date and what the active development is. But if you want to, we would love for people to start, more contributing to those open source SDKs. But hopefully that comes out soon, because I personally would be very happy if we had a JavaScript wrapper.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't see that you already got that one. I was reading while you were talking.
It's all good.
Doubled up on that one.
Can you talk about how you'll be working on 5G networks? I don't know exactly what this is talking about. So 5G is essentially just going to create like a bigger bandwidth pipe for a lot of the internet traffic around the world. One of the fundamental limitations of Hashgraph, I guess, in terms of ability to process TPS is the internet bandwidth. So 5G would actually kind of make it easier for more computers to participate as nodes, because one of the most difficult requirements to meet is probably bandwidth. And so if more people around the world have access to 5G or higher telecom or internet speeds, that makes it easier for them to run Hedera nodes. It also makes our time to latency and our time to settlement faster as well. But I'm not too sure what specifically that question was about. Thomas, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, so how closely will Hedera system be integrated with Chainlink? What level do they talk to each other? So we're looking at the same level as the current support for Ethereum. So you would be able to create requests from your smart contract on Hedera and use that to invoke a Chainlink oracle to then respond to your smart contract again on Hedera. So yeah, what we're going to do is the same level of support as what we have for Ethereum today.
Yeah, and that's awesome because that allows anyone working on, proof of concepts or currently developing to potentially migrate if they choose to do so, which is very exciting. Let us see. Yeah, we're super happy to answer your questions. This is why we're doing this. Love to just generate awareness and education about not only our individual projects, but ways that we're working together. Is Hashgraph impervious to hardware backdoors? I don't think anything's impervious to hardware backdoors. I don't know exactly what that means. Hedera's entire code base will be open review when we reach V1 of the platform. And so everyone will be able to see the code base, be able to download it and compile it and make sure that it's running appropriately. And then that version matches what's actually running on the nodes. We're not I guess you could use things like trusted execution environments. I know Chainlink's working on some super interesting stuff there. But impervious to hardware backdoors. I don't know if I'm the person to answer that question. If you're interested in HBAR's distribution or economics, go to the HBAR page on hedera.com. That is the best advice and the most I can point you in a direction. There's a coin economics paper on there that you can download and look at for some of those answers. And if they're not the answers you're looking for, send us an email and hopefully we can get you some that are acceptable.
Calvin has a good question in there. Let's say I wanted to create a pay-per-use data aggregator marketplace with Chainlink and Hashgraph. How could I scale for what could potentially be big data? This comes down to our own development plan, where with the coordinator contract and service agreements, instead of creating indistinct requests to an equal number of Oracle contracts, with the coordinator contract, you would create one request to a single Oracle contract and received N responses to that coordinator contract, and you would get one aggregated response back to your contract. So that's where scaling really comes in with Chainlink. That plus threshold signatures essentially means that it's essentially just two transactions, one requesting transaction, and then at least one Chainlink node would need to return back with an answer for that fulfillment transaction. So we're already handling Oracle data at scale, and then Hashgraph would just naturally inherit that as the integration goes further.
Awesome. What type of solutions do you see for last mile payment systems, fiat to HBAR, HBAR to fiat? That's a good question. Because HBAR is so fast, you could actually, and the fees are so small, you could actually just do two transfers. Like you could have an exchange as a real-time proxy between a payment provider for a last mile solution. So if you had someone in the middle there that was willing to accept HBARs for you and pay out HBARs on the other side, this initial person could actually just pay twice the transaction fees. And within 4 seconds instead of 2 seconds, you could actually have fiat kind of on the other side of this payment gateway. The difficulty is, having people set up that can handle that type of throughput and the regulatory concerns there. So someone could easily just do like a masking of a stable coin on Hedera, just doing a bunch of twice the amount of transactions really, if they had an exchange integration there. But there's other things like Carbon is building a stable coin on us already, which makes sense as a last mile kind of payment method where if you have HBAR, you can convert it to Carbon if you want and then pay with Carbon. or vice versa. And so I think we'll see kind of the same way that last mile payment solutions are picking up on other networks with things, like Ethereum's burner wallet and kind of these other creative ways. Hopefully the finality and the throughput of Hedera kind of pushes those forward into the next step of what's possible there. Could there be a payment consolidator to facilitate payments and make them cheap enough for $1 transactions? So that's actually one of the main things that Hedera is focused on with micropayments. The minimum fee, or the fee for all cryptocurrency payments on Hedera right now is I think it's 0.0001 cents. And so that makes, compared to a Stripe or a PayPal that's taking 20, 30 cents and then a percentage cut, that's orders of magnitude less than traditional payment providers. And so what that enables you to do is you can send someone actually 1 penny or even less than a penny on Hedera, and you're actually getting a better margin of that money in terms of what's getting to the user versus what's going to fees than traditional payment systems. So Hashgraph, if you want to do anything in micropayments, microtransactions, small value transfers, that's something Hashgraph is totally focused on and kind of optimized for.
I'm going to hop in and take care of my backlog here.
Oh, no worries.
So could randomization computation be done somehow? Could Chainlink offer that data for lottery draws or giveaways, for example? Yes, that is something that we're actively working on and developing is randomization and random data back to smart contracts. So yes, and since earlier I said anything that you would be able to do on Ethereum, you would be able to do with Hashgraph. The same rules apply there. So yes. Do you think Chainlink oracles can be integrating into Neuralink to enhance connectivity? I'm not familiar with what Neuralink is. I just searched for them real quick, and at least the first site that I came up with doesn't have a lot of information.
Yeah, it's a brain-to-machine interface backed by Elon Musk.
Oh, okay.
Connecting brains to computers. It's an interesting question, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically if they have an API to connect to, then yes.
Chainlink wants it.
Yeah. And then is there a Hedera Chainlink adapter available? It's not available yet, but it will be soon. Yeah,
well said. I was going to joke that you guys are going to start putting Neuralink logo on some slides now that asked this question. What type of savings would the integration with systems like Carbon give? So Carbon's a stable coin, and the premise and the value proposition of stable coins is just that once you have it in a stable coin, it'll always be stable, obviously. And so if you just think that the market is going to be volatile, or if you think there's a variety of reasons why you would want a stable currency. And so Carbon offers those in the same way that Tether and these other stable coins do. Different mechanism of how to actually maintain those reserves and how they pull it off. Same value proposition to end users.
I'm just going to jump in. There was one ambassador related question.
Oh yeah, that's all you, Anthony.
Yeah, I shared earlier in the chat, there was a question about the same thing there. If you're interested in becoming an ambassador, I did share the application link that has more details about the program there. You can click on that. Actually, I'll reshare it right now, but we are open for anyone who's willing and able to help out with the team there. So I'll share that link again. Thanks for that question, Tony.
Yeah, if anyone's excited about what we're doing and wants to be enabled and help organize some meetups like this and work with the Hedera team, we'd definitely encourage you to try and become ambassadors. Lots of really, really smart people who honestly have direct impact into what we're doing and what we're, what we end up doing. Do all HBAR wallets need KYC at this point? That's a good question. So Hedera makes actually a kind of a different distinction between wallets and accounts. So to get a Hedera account, it depends who's giving you that account. If the person or organization giving you that Hedera account is a legal business entity working in the US, it is up to them to do whatever type of regulatory compliance concerns they think are necessary for that account. Once you have that account, you can use the wallets however you want. Like there's no like, so the question is like, does Hedera allow for non-KYC'd accounts? Because the wallets are just kind of like a container for your account. And that is a question that's just up to whoever's creating that account for you and how what their perspective and what their legal jurisdiction is and what regulatory compliance concerns they have. Hopefully that answers. I am not a lawyer, obviously. How much would it cost to create a stable currency and maintenance on Hashgraph? That's a great question. So we actually have a really nice fee calculator that I helped work on. That's on hedera.com/fees. And so you could actually go in and plug in kind of the values that you expect your smart contracts to be, like how big the contract is in bytes, how many times you expect people to use it, how frequently you're going to need to do different things with that smart contract. So you can go to that calculator and actually just plug in the different values. And it'll tell you kind of the estimated cost for your use case. And so if you want to estimate how much it'll cost to run like a stable coin, you could go, find out the average size in bytes of a stablecoin contract or all those contracts, throw them into our calculator, estimate it potential usage. If you have, 1,000 people sending it a day, it'll tell you how much it should cost. But Hedera should be orders of magnitude or noticeably cheaper than almost all other alternatives out there. Other than those networks like EOS that are trying to do free transactions. Hedera just doesn't believe that is a long-term sustainable model and that you do need some types of incentives and spam and denial of service mitigation with fees. So there's a clear security proposition there as well. NFTs on Hashgraph, absolutely. We run any of your Solidity. So if you want to do a 721 or any NFTs that you're doing elsewhere, it works identically. We have some companies doing, Diamond Standard is working on an NFT that's actually backed by Diamond Holdings. DLA Piper, like I said in my presentation, is building a tokenization real marketplace. Lots of NFTs being developed. Someone said Lehman spoke of private nodes. Can you share any insights into this? So I'm not sure what Lehman may or may not have said that you're referring to. Currently, Hedera has a closed permissioned set of nodes. It's just the Hedera Governing Council. Phase 2 will be opening that up to selective partners, people doing meaningful work in the ecosystem, known entities. Eventually, kind of phase 3 will be permissionless and anonymous nodes if you choose to. You could identify yourself in hopes of getting bigger proxy payments, or you could remain anonymous and just have your own type of interface to the network. So hopefully that is kind of what you were asking. In addition to that kind of plan, and that's our path to decentralization, you should watch Lehman's webinar and the YouTube video on the path to decentralization. In addition to that, we have mirror nodes. And so mirror nodes are able to read from the state of the Hedera network. They're not able to contribute to that consensus or anything like that. And so anyone's able to run a mirror node. You don't have to, there's no KYC, there's no kind of decentralization process there. And so you can have your own mirror node and see the state of the network. Additionally, I guess there's a lot of things about nodes. Additionally, the consensus service can be integrated with Hyperledger Fabric. And so basically those mirror nodes would be reading from the state of the Hedera network and use that state in your Fabric deployment. And so those Hyperledger Fabric nodes that actually have kind of the state of your application, if you're using the consensus service, could be private or permissioned or whatever kind of side chain or side architecture that you're looking for there. So hopefully some combination of that answers your questions. Yeah, we do have a calculator. It's super exciting. Send us feedback on it. We're also working on different ways to expose that and make it easier to estimate. Like our goal is always to be an extremely easy to use, welcoming platform, and things like the calculator where you can actually estimate your development costs easily, and the fact that our fees are set in US dollars, so that those development costs will scale linearly with your users and your consumption is something that we take a lot of focus and effort into. Does Hashgraph plan to go after the banking and settlement market share? So we're definitely targeting payments as a specific use case. And we're actively looking to fill out council representation from those markets and geographies and industries not currently represented. I don't think Hashgraph and Hedera's goal is to disrupt or replace any of these existing institutions. Hedera wants to be the network that all of these companies and institutions are using and running their core businesses on top of. So a best case scenario is those entities join the council and use Hedera in a meaningful way. Hopefully that answers your questions there. Could you connect to Chainlink data with Hyperledger through Hashgraph? Yeah, we'll have a direct integration with Hyperledger Fabric. So you could have some type of smart contract that is integrating or feeding data to or from our consensus service in some way, or Chainlink could be feeding data into our consensus service somehow. I don't know how you would do that though. And you could actually use and persist that data that's then sent into your Fabric deployments. So there is interoperability there as well. Thomas might be able to speak more about if they're doing anything with Hyperledger or any insights from his side on that question.
Yeah, and yeah, basically that's planned as well. So yeah, no change. Yes. No change from your answer really.
Yeah.
Yes.
Someone asked which AWS services could Hashgraph potentially replace in the stack. It's a good question. It's totally a different paradigm. So if you think about what services AWS already provides, and then the specific ones that make sense to be decentralized. Amazon isn't, leading the way in this by any means, but kind of these OAuth or these different, login with Facebook or login with these other type of providers. Hashgraph as a credential and a decentralized identity platform makes a lot of sense as a service that's kind of adjacent to decentralized services that you're using. Amazon does have their, I think it's their quantum ledger database or whatever they're calling it. And so they are hopefully, I guess they're moving into the space. But I guess what Hedera does is a new paradigm, and you will do new things on it that you wouldn't have been able to do on AWS. It's not like we're, disrupting individual products that they have. It's a completely new thing that you can do completely new things with. How will Hashgraph smart contracts avoid problem of blockchain bloat and data size? That's a good question. So Hashgraph has guaranteed finality that's formally proven in our COQ proof and the mathematical paper. And so basically, Hashgraph, after it comes to finality on that order of transactions, doesn't actually need to persist that entire historical transaction state. What Hedera will do is we'll store that information and the result of those transactions on Ledger for a specified duration, whether it's like 3 minutes or 24 hours. You'll have the actual information of how Hedera got to that state. But after Hedera has gotten to that state, we'll actually update that smart contract, we'll update that balance, we'll update that file. And you actually don't need to store the entire history of how you got to that given state. We have these interesting concepts called state proofs, which Lehman has some great videos on that I'd recommend you looking at as well, that kind of validate the given state of the network at any given time. So Hedera won't store the entire transaction history or entire transactions state. That's kind of what our mirror nodes are for. You can store all the transactions and all the history that you actually care about. And so that's one of the ways that we solve it. One of the other ways that we solve it is with things like the consensus service. So the consensus service allows you to use Hedera for just ordering your transaction messaging. And so those messages are extremely lightweight, extremely kind of just transient. They only persist through the Hedera network and then get stored in the mirror nodes. They don't actually get stored anywhere on Hedera. And so after you have these mirror nodes with your transaction history and a state proof in these mirror nodes, then you can order and use that transaction history in even like a private Ethereum deployment if you wanted to. And then so that way the actual state and kind of the heavy data that you're using is existing off the Hedera chain, but you're using Hedera for the important things like the decentralized ordering and the consensus and the ABFT security. So there's definitely a lot of ways that Hedera is optimizing and making sure that it is a stable platform, not just now, but long into the future, specifically with data flow. It's a good question. Cool. We'll probably give it like, I don't know, what sounds good to you guys, like 5 or 10 more minutes of questions. And then we can wrap it up and call it a day. And the lovely people who joined us in Toronto can network and hang out. Any other questions? Any questions?
Again, yeah, it did definitely slow down there.
Yeah, someone asked, is there a planned integration with UMA protocol synthetic contracts? I don't know what that is. So I'm not aware of one, but I would be happy to learn more. And if there are projects that the community wants to see running on Hedera or partnered with Hedera, obviously reach out to us, let us know, and we can prioritize specific integrations or support and allocate our resources according to what the community actually wants. So this is presumably kind of about our HCS, Hyperledger Fabric, and a Chainlink integration. So they said private transactions of HBAR with private smart contracts, exchange with private data from Chainlinks, so apps could do everything private. It's not that everything would be private because you're still sending encrypted messages over the Hedera network. There's different benefits, like no one has access to insights of the state of your contract at any given time if you don't want them to. So it's not total privacy. It's just a different set of trade-offs that will enable new business models, new applications. I don't think it's a completely new service that Hashgraph uniquely offers to the market. You rarely hear other layer ones saying like, hey, let us order all the transactions for your sidechain and encouraging that. So it's something very unique to Hashgraph and what we're trying to do. But it's not entirely private, I guess, is the hesitancy that I have, because you're still sending stuff over the public network. But there is security and privacy benefits to it. But saying it's like something like Zcash or like completely zero knowledge is not correct. Hopefully that is what you're looking for.
I can talk about that a little bit as well, because for Chainlink's perspective, you could technically already pass through encrypted data to an API endpoint now. It's just like right now, because like Ethereum is so expensive, with you basically have to pay for every byte that you're going to send through it. And with transactions being significantly less expensive on Hashgraph, you could probably have an easier time doing that on Hashgraph. So essentially you could encrypt data off chain, pass it into your smart contract, use that in your request to be passed through the Chainlink node, where still the Chainlink node wouldn't know, but so it would just come down to, that would be very interesting to use Chainlink with, because you could do that without a TEE.
Yeah. There's, I think, a lot of room to explore in that space. Yeah, it'll certainly be exciting. And absolutely all the stuff you guys are doing with Mixicals and stuff, that was an interesting release as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Lehman says total privacy. trust Lehman much more than I would. You can have totally encrypted messages on Hedera's HCS that no one really knows what the contents are. That encrypted message can be persisted to a Hyperledger Fabric deployment. That Fabric deployment then could decrypt and use that data as its transaction history. And so you do have total privacy in that sense. Like it's just what types of privacy or context are you talking about? Obviously, you can still see something like the public key that is sending messages to that HCS topic, right? So then you have like pseudo anonymity, and then you have like privacy of the transactions and privacy of the transaction data. You also have privacy of the transaction state. If you call that total privacy, like, okay, that's total privacy, I get it. Definitely though, listen to Lehman way more than me. He has some great presentations specifically on HCS in ways that we can enable these types of Hyperledger and hybrid architecture deployments. Specifically the webinar with Brian Gross from IBM when we actually announced the HCS is a great webinar to watch if you're looking into ways that we can enable these types of private architectures. There's one in here that might make sense for you, Thomas, if you want it.
Yeah. What is a mexical?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at a very high level, a mexical is a way of hiding the outcome of a bet or an agreement or some kind of agreement. I hope you don't mind if I plug our blog. It's
no, go for it. Plug all you want.
It's blog.chain.link. We have a
only if you can use Mexicals on Hedera though.
Yeah, and I mean because you would still utilize the same functionality anyway. The big part about Mexicals is the part that occurs off chain, which would be entirely blockchain agnostic, like by default, because that's just talking to the Chainlink node, or rather even the adapter. So yeah, we have a really good blog post on our blog that explains Mexicals without you having to read the white paper that we wrote on Mexicals. But yeah, just at a high level, it's a way to prevent one from being able to see who got payment out of a smart contract.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting stuff. Cool. Well, I think that this is dying down now. I think we've had some really good questions. Thomas, we super appreciate you coming and letting us get some insight into how you can use Chainlink and Hedera together to do some interesting things.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're certainly looking forward to continuing our partnership and our integration and working with you guys.
And I want to say thank you, Cooper, for taking the time to help us out here and getting these questions answered and presenting as well. And also, again, thank you, Thomas, for taking time as well. Greatly appreciate that. Thanks to everyone who showed up at the meetup in Toronto. Appreciate you guys. And thanks for everyone who tuned into this. We definitely want to do more of these kind of meetup events and doing more webinars like this. So if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.